My name is Marc-Antoine. I've been working in the space of collective intelligence for the past 8 years. Hello.
Hey, Steve.
We started introductions, so you haven't missed anything yet. Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
Been working in the field of collective intelligence for many years. I worked on a tool that was then called Assemble, that is now IdeaLoom. It's a tool that is based on the premise of progressive formalization. That is, I don't expect people necessarily to be able to understand argument structure. So I started with a web forum application, basically, and then it's possible to take text runs from the web forum and associate them with traditional argument structure by hand. I found that this hand structuration does lower the barrier to entry, but I've been less active on that project because I've been working on a protocol for what I want is a GitHub of mental maps. What I see is everybody has their own mental maps, and it's very hard to just say this is the mental map that everybody should refer to. So I'm trying to make it very easy to fork and merge concept graphs, I should say, rather than mental maps. So
is there any formalized structure to them, or is it as open as mental maps?
It's formalized, but still very open. It's a generalized hypergraph. That means every statement is an array structure and has an identity, which means you can refer to a statement. But otherwise, I am trying to build on existing technologies, including semantic web and so on, which is a bit difficult because you don't have name statements normally. So I'm juggling with the specs and trying to make that happen. I'm very much at the specking level still, but I'm beginning to I'm getting to past that end. But I'm still working on IdeaLoom for informal to formal systems. So that's what I'm doing.
Great. I don't know who wants to go next. I could start with. I'll introduce myself then. Timothy, hi. I'm from California, but I live in Rio de Janeiro now, and I'm a software developer. So I don't come at this from an academic perspective. Just got into. Actually, I worked as a software architect, and at a time a very hands-off role of software architect, where it turned out like basically my job became facilitating technical decisions about things about which I was not an expert, right? So it became, structuring the decision into trade-offs and getting people's reasons behind the option they preferred, organizing them, validating those reasons, right? And then making a collective decision, what we thought was the best based on all the factors that we pulled together. So I built some support tools in the company for that sort of thing. Eventually, because of whenever the political elections come around, you start to see how information does not get passed on and collected, which was my job at the time as an architect. You could see how it was failing in the public domain. I started getting interested in technologies for managing our debates, our information around political decisions. And so, as an engineer, I just got some ideas and started developing stuff. And I've gone through many iterations of that. And I guess it's been years now. I don't know if it was 2016. It was the 2016 election got me involved again through. I came through Democracy Earth Foundation. I don't know if you are familiar with them. Yeah, but their idea is a type of direct democracy known as liquid democracy, where you could delegate votes, and they evolved to being kind of on a blockchain and creating tools for that. And my problem with directed democracy has always been an uninformed voting population, right? And so I see the work on the canonical debate as the necessary tool to make people be able to trust in direct democracy more, right? Actually, through the Democracy Earth Foundation, I met some of the members here, and they put up a forum there, and through there I met some of the members who we founded together the Canonical Debate Lab. We created our own Slack, and came up with a white paper and that sort of thing. So that's where the whole Canonical Debate Lab came from, was actually a lot of software engineers doing the same thing in parallel. And to this day, we still have it. We have 5 or 6 different projects trying to do the same thing in different ways, and we just kind of discuss our ideas. And hopefully someday we can all pull together. But for now, we're experimenting with different ideas. And we've been trying to get interest from people in the academic world, and we've had some contacts, but I think only now is it really starting to happen, and that a lot of new members are bringing in that perspective, which will be excellent. That's it. Who wants to go next? Felix?
Yeah, I guess everyone knows me, so I thought, Steven, or should I introduce myself again for the video? What do you think? Yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm Felix. I studied computer science in Germany like 5 years ago, and I was organizing lots of sports events before, and we had like a community of like 60 people scattered over the world who had to make decisions, and that was a real problem. And there were some custom tools and so on, but I always thought, okay, there must be a better way. And I wrote my master thesis about this topic, and the core idea was to scale communication, the number of people and in topic complexity. And yeah, so we built a prototype as everyone did, and we stepped into lots of traps as everyone does. And yeah, I think I learned a lot from that. I tried to, but after I graduated, I wanted to do my PhD in this space, but I failed to get any funding. So then I said, okay, try to make a startup and try to sell this thing to companies, because I thought, okay, scaling communication makes also sense for huge companies where lots of people have to make decisions and stuff. Yeah, we also failed to do that in a way, and the whole tool, it was a graph-based collaboration chat tool and so on, but it more transformed into the direction of a general collaboration tool and not so much focused on communication anymore. So it's basically a whole different project now. But I learned a lot, and I know how I would do things differently right now. So the nice thing for me is I don't have a project that I say, okay, I want to promote it or whatever. I'm open to anything else, and but I have the experience I got from these projects. And right now I just try to pull people together who are interested in this whole space. Yeah. That's it. Steven?
Ian?
Hi, sorry I was late. I was still finishing up some work. Yeah, so a quick introduction. I think most of you know except Marc-Antoine. Is that how you say your name? Yeah. So way back when I did my master thesis, I had 2 project ideas. One of them was Socrates. The other one is what I ended up doing my PhD in after I finished my master thesis, continued working on that. So many years later, after having wanted to work on that, I graduated and finally spent like a year time actually implementing something, and that is the resulting website you see right now. It was like after work hour hackathon project kind of. And my main focus with Socrates is really to allow layman people to use it, because I've noticed while looking at what other people have been doing, It's this over-formalized, argumentation theory-inspired thing that you really cannot expect people to use. And I would even argue it's not necessary to have such a highly formalized form, because people inherently, they do know how to argue. There's just a lot of implicit stuff going on. So the question is how to strike the right balance between allowing for implicit arguments and still having sufficient structure that you have can enable what I think Tim usually calls canonical debates. Like, you don't have the same discussions over and over again. You know where to go to if you want to build on top of existing arguments. And primarily, I think the original idea for me came from, I've been a moderator on Stack Exchange for like 8 years, 9 years or so. And I don't know whether you know how Stack Exchange works. You have these meta sites where you talk about how the community works. It's like a self-organizing community. And discussions there are horrible because they port discussions into a Q&A format. So while thinking about it, how can those discussions be improved, I pretty much came up with what we're all talking about right now. So that's also why my take is very much Stack Exchange inspired, and we're having community moderation in the future in mind. And I think you might have picked up on that now and then whenever we have discussions about curation versus community moderation, etc. So I think that's my quick introduction.
Right. So I'm wondering who are the other people who's came, who are new. So it's Marc-Antoine, it's Jack Park, it's other guys from Germany. I don't know if they belong together, or is it different universities?
DBAS group.
Yes, exactly.
No, they're a separate group.
Okay. Yeah.
I invited them because one of my reviewers on my latest submission, they said, "Hey, check out this system." So it might have been done, might not have been, but I figured since I have a public GitHub repo, I invited them.
Yeah.
I could speak for Jack because I know his. I work closely with him and I know what he'd be saying. He's working on a Quest infrastructure. He wants to basically gamify the process of argumentation, and he believes very much in the value of roles in a guild, the roles in a guild model of teamwork. What his bet is that if you get people in a guild, a lot of the very negative dynamics of conversation will actually play out inside the guild, if the guild is diverse enough. And the guild argumentation moves will be higher quality because the dynamic, the scoring system will reward good moves and ding ad hominem attacks and all the such. So the guild will self-police to avoid being penalized as a guild. And so there's, on the one hand, the question of adding gamification and on a collective argumentation tree. He's very traditional in the IBIS argumentation tree, like a lot of people here, I think. But he's also very much looking at, for him, a very important part of making that happen is deduplication of similar ideas. And he's looking a lot at AI tools for deduplication. So that's one of his key activities. He's looking at topic maps as one of the background data models to allow for better deduplication. And I work closely with him on the background data model. So that's what Jack is about. In a nutshell, he would say more, but that's the basis as I see it.
I haven't had the chance yet to meet Jack, but I think I've seen a meeting between you and Felix before that you shared somewhere online. I don't know. And I'm still wondering what it looks like. Does he have any screenshots or publicly accessible prototypes or even some documentation or whatsoever, or is it just an idea for now?
Uh, he's done a lot of prototypes, and he's based it on previous existing tools. One of the existing tools is Mowgli, of which there's no running code version, but that did exist. It was used. It was used by the U.S. Army actually, and there's a lot of documentation about it. So if you look for Mowgli with two M's, it's fine, and I can try to give you some more references on that. His prototypes are more at the playing with the data model level, and I think are less convincing of the whole idea than a lot of what he's doing otherwise. He's still working a lot on the background data model like I am. Though he's at the prototype level, I'm at the data level. Though I have a running tool with IdeaLoom, so it's a different situation. So that's the answer in short form. But I could direct you to some of the more personal idea management prototypes he's working with. And there's one called Lightweight. But there's been many iterations, so none of them is quite valid.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So I think Timothy just dropped, but anyways, I think Ben can introduce himself. I'm recording everything. Hi, Ben.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Ben, and I live in Vermont in the United States, home of Bernie Sanders. And the short story is I come from the perspective of a grassroots organizer. Since 2013, I've been running a voter engagement platform that delivers 1-minute voice messages from voters to their legislators. And that's indicating support or opposition to specific proposals, legislation. So I focused on the formal legislative process at the state level here in Vermont. Basically what I found out is there's a whole industry built around trying to get voters to contact their legislators. That's the advocacy industry. I generally refer to it as movement politics. These are these, national, sometimes international nonprofits like the Sierra Club or the Marijuana Policy Project, the AARP. There's hundreds of them. They lobby, and their whole organization is dedicated to getting voters to contact legislators. But then from the legislator side, specifically here in Vermont, they don't keep track of all the contacts specific legislators are receiving, indicating support or opposition to specific legislation. So there's this industry that dumps millions and millions of dollars into hiring organizers and purchasing all this technology. Voters do contact legislators, but we don't keep track of any experiences where I was leading call banking sessions, generating a known number of calls to a specific legislator. And then when we followed up with that legislator, they would essentially deny contacts they were receiving. And they would say that, oh, well, I'm receiving contacts from other sources you're unaware of, which is legitimate. But they would vote based on a ratio of contacts supporting or opposing specific proposal. So without valid data verifying how many contacts they are receiving, then it's all, it's power asymmetry. Voters have no power in that dynamic. Legislators get to just say, I heard from 90% no and 10% yes, and I'm going to vote no, and no one can check. So that was in 2013 where I started that effort. Long story short, over many years of me just dedicating my own personal money, my own time. So I will say on the business model side, we have not ever generated revenue, but we are just an LLC registered in my state of Vermont. So I do believe that the best way to secure the long-term future of this work, or really any work, is to create a financially viable model. And we can talk more about that later. But over the years, so I've dedicated, I've put in probably $50,000 or $60,000 of my own money over 8 years now. I also raised $50,000 in 2014 from a local person here in Vermont, and he was actually the chair of the Democratic Party here in Vermont. but he agreed philosophically with my dedication to being 100% nonpartisan. So that's one of the problems that exists in today's, all the data is fractured and siloed, and there's no source of truth. So there being no source of truth is what really drew me into the Canonical Debate Lab. So again, I could talk for days and days about all this stuff, as you all could as well. And quite frankly, I just feel extremely grateful to be included in these types of conversations, because I don't have a college degree. I'm self-taught. I come from an entrepreneurial background. I'm like raised. I'm one of 9 children. I grew up in a super poor family in rural Vermont. So I have no credentials. I have no justification for trying to assert that my ideas are valuable, other than the empirical evidence. So being around you guys for me is kind of like, a little leaguer going up to the major leagues and watching how everybody plays ball and really just trying to soak that all in. But I ultimately, what I see my ideas evolving toward is capturing natural conversation about politics via audio files, and then parsing those conversations into a debate map structure. For instance, if I right now were to present, there are major emergency bills being proposed in our legislature, and there's for and against why the money is going to certain places, but there's no source of truth for any of this. So if someone were to be able to produce a website, a debate map, a tree, as those arguments get filtered in. So I'll give you one quick example.
I can do that at this point.
What's that?
Propose a debate with a lot of work, but my tool was actually used recently in online forum like World Social Forum, Inspired Forum, and in the plenaries. Basically, what we had, it wasn't automated anything. So that means we had people taking notes and posting them, but then there was automatic translation involved. That was one of the few automatic things, which means that people could participate in many languages using the notes and hear what was being said. But then those notes were tied to ideas, proposals, arguments. There was the vote technology is there but wasn't used, but could be absolutely used in this context. And but you can have a map of the debate by people tying transcripts, bits of transcripts to a tree that they built as the conversation goes.
So you're saying that was those connections between the arguments or ideas were done manually?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So right. So definitely, if you had an army of people that could do that, the quest, of course, is to automate the process.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
But
it's a step 0, right? As opposed to not having it.
Sure. I just can't execute on that actual idea. So to me, that's not an idea that I can execute on. But I totally understand what you're saying, and one of the reasons that I'm continuing to pursue the idea is because I do think it's actually viable, and I think you just pointed that out from a low tech.
So I have a few perspectives to add to that, which is, I think in terms of technology, it's already there in a lot of ways. I mean, you could use Kialo, if nothing else, for that. That's what Kialo is for,
Capturing audio?
Not capturing audio, but capturing audio. In fact, there's if you're talking about capturing audio, I just heard a podcast. I think it posted. Are you in the Great American Debate group, Slack? Yeah. So I posted a podcast about a group that in 2016 already started trying to capture what was being said in community radio, like local talk shows and things like that. They found live streams on the internet, and they just developed technology to be streaming that and transcribing automatically and organizing it.
Is that the one based out of Boston that produces the hardware that you put on the table?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
right.
I followed those links when you posted that. I jumped right on that and tracked those down. I think that's super interesting, and Boston's only a couple hours away from me. But one thing I'll add just to my perspective is late last week, I had a meeting about a potential strategic partnership with a survey software company called Question Pro. And they're very popular in academia. That's actually how I found them. I found them from taking a survey that I'm looking at. This is now getting into a survey panel model. So again, the idea is, how do you harvest the opinions or data from voters in an organized way to put it into a standardized format? And for me, to try to avoid reinventing the wheel, the opinion polling industry really already does a lot of this. So I started kind of sniffing around their technologies and how they do it. I've connected with 2 PhD pollsters here in my state from University of Vermont and Castleton University. And what I'm looking at doing is working with this survey software company that also provides survey panel services. So they help you formulate the structure of the questioning and develop the methodologies and the models so that your claims about the veracity of your data match with the methodologies. And so that's where I'm at right now, is looking at, so the other thing I'll say about myself is I'm not a software developer. And obviously when you talk about building technologies, that can be a big challenge, not being able to write the code myself. So that's one of the reasons that I've been working on this for 8 years, and I'm slowly chunking along. But so that said, my model is actually putting together more kind of like a puzzle of expertise in their own domains, and creating a collage of experts who are all far smarter than me and more accomplished than me. And then my goal is to adapt that to, is he okay? It looks like he's falling down the stairs or something. Mark, are you okay?
The video is stuck.
Gotcha. That's kind of weird.
There he is.
So yes.
Okay, Mark?
So anyhow, I'm combining the audio with the surveys, and I have this, as some of you on the CDL Slack know, I've been talking about starting a podcast. So my idea to take the sophistication of the technology that you guys are all working on is to build a UX that looks like what I call a participatory podcast. So I have legislators in our state right now interested in producing a 30-minute weekly podcast for their district. And what I'm doing with the survey company is explaining this concept to them and seeing if they'll help me build out the survey side for each episode of the podcast. Because then what you have is legislators can have their podcasts that then are associated with the survey, obviously about the topic in that particular podcast. But then voters could produce their own audio, and then advocacy organizations could produce their own audio. Everyone has interests. The commonality is it's the same legislation. So this taps into the formalities of the legislative process, which are very conducive to what Canonical Debate Lab is trying to do with the argumentation side. It's just very protocol based. There's specific proposals with specific amendments, and what I'm trying to do is connect that survey to the specific proposals, and then go out and, chicken or the egg thing, how do you get people to use it? So anyhow, my kind of, what I've distilled my 8 years of work down to is a participatory podcast, because that's so the other thing I'll say about audio is there's an inherent elitism in any pure technology-based solution. So here in Vermont, we're a very rural state, despite the fact we're in New England and the East Coast of the United States. 30% of our state does not have access to high-speed internet. So currently, right now, as we're dealing with the coronavirus and the emergency supplies needing to get out to rural communities, we're having real trouble in our state, just on the communication front. We just had a legislator post on Facebook a screenshot of her municipal meeting about getting emergency supplies, and out of like 12 squares that there should have been people there, like 8 of them were having internet problems and they were blacked out. And she's like, we can't even hold a municipal meeting right now because our communities don't have the internet. So for me in 2013, I made a decision to use audio, which I basically adapted call center service technology, modern call centers that big corporations deploy to receive the feedback from their constituencies. I've adapted that to the legislative process because it taps into the telephone network, which is a more universal communication platform for rural America. There's a lot of people that still don't have smartphones and the internet. So because I'm working in democracy, it has to be universally accessible. And I'm not willing to put something out there that is just a pure technology-based solution yet, which is why I've kind of deviated from a lot of the blockchain work that's been done over the past 3 to 5 years in the democracy space, because it just doesn't get to the people who need it most in the poorest communities. So I'm kind of reverse engineering this whole thing. I'm starting from the people in the trailer parks. My wife is a medical provider who worked with the homeless population in Denver, providing free medical care to people for many years. So I just come to this from a nonpartisan, non-believer in the duopoly, two-party system. Just a kind of general moralistic, how do we take these types of ideas that are, you guys are all elite thinkers and builders, and how do we get them in front of the people that need it most so that we can prove to our politicians 90% of people want universal health care. Do it now. And I followed Occupy Wall Street very closely. I'm 40 years old. Little backstory on me, I ran a foreclosure company in Denver between 2006 and 2010. So I was literally in the belly of the beast during the collapse of 2008. I understand money very deeply. Timothy and I were just talking about the history of money and debt. I highly recommend you guys look into the economist Michael Hudson, who is amazing on the history of debt and how we're the first society to not cancel debt. For thousands and thousands of years, going back to Sumar, societies have always canceled debt because the math of compound interest means debt will definitely overwhelm the ability to be paid back. So there's a lot of history kind of behind what I'm doing too. I'm really trying to connect the nodes of what you guys are doing in this amazing technology piece into the political history of movement politics and the suffrage movement and abolition and how, anyhow, I can feel my blood pressure going up, so I'll take a deep breath and relax. But I just, again, want to, thank all you guys for doing this work. And I'm kind of like the little kid in the bleachers watching you guys play ball, taking notes furiously, and then going to other smart people in my local area and saying, hey guys, this is possible. Let's do this thing. So thank you guys all for doing that. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you for your introduction. So the thing is, all of us have some fuzzy, big idea in their minds, but we still don't know what it actually is, I think. And
yeah, I have some things I wanted to that were brought up that I thought would be important to maybe to talk about. I've talked about it a few times before, but it's one subject we could try to follow at some point, which is, the mapping technology already exists, right? So the question, huh?
Does it?
Well, in many forms, sure. I mean, Kialo maps it.
I mean,
you can do mind maps. You have
in one form or another, exactly. But the whole reason why I'm not satisfied with Cal and doing what I'm doing is because it's not the way that I see it. And I think the same goes for Graph, by the way, no?
Right. When that's the point I'm trying to draw out here, is that it exists, but why isn't it solving the problem, right? And so there's a lot of answers to that. And one is maybe that the modeling is insufficient. One may be that and for those of us who have tried to do it by hand, it's a lot of manual work, right? So that's a problem. A lot of it is superficial. Like I would give Kialo that one, which is, it doesn't get you much further in terms of information than, hold on, I have to close the door. Yeah, it doesn't give you much information than reading an in-depth article, essentially,
Can I interject
at the
real
level
quick,
they've gotten it.
Timothy?
Go for it.
One point. So the one point I'll just make is, for me, a lot of these solutions are not connected to formal proposals. So there's a really big gap between actionable political protesting or political pressure and the application of this technology to be meaningful. So the technologies totally exist 100%, but I have not seen, and this is where Democracy Earth was really inspiring to me. I don't know if you guys are aware of Be Taiwan and the GovZero movement, and Audrey Tang. Totally look into that. There's a Polis is the polling software they use. I posted about this recently. It's a great polling software. I know Colin McGill, the founder. I've been talking to him for years. But it's that gap, Timothy. So I'll let you go back. I just wanted to point that out. That's my context, is where is this technology being applied to force a politician who's lying to do the right thing? That's for me the kind of minimal viable product.
Right. So that's a very, very good point. That's one of the critical ends, and it's essentially a marketplace, right? It's a two-sided market or a multi-sided market, right? And this is what has been brought up before. It's just really hard to get that started. But go ahead, Marc-Antoine, you wanted to add something. Your microphone's off, I think. Or at least, yeah, we're not hearing you. No, I'm not hearing you. Oh no.
Is it
Try plugging in again.
Tight? Yeah.
Good old advice. Have you tried turning off and on again?
Oh, he's coming back.
Okay, how is this?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, sorry.
Excellent. Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, the Zoom loses connection to the microphone from time to time, and sorry. Okay, I wanted to back out. I understand that first, Ben, thank you for we need end users, and you're very much bringing us back to connecting us to end applications, and I think that's wonderful. And I understand why you think about mapping, Ben. Stephen and Timothy, and I agree. I also think a lot about mapping, but I think it's very important to see that there's this whole spectrum of activity why do we believe mapping is important? We need to make that explicit. Because I understand what you're saying about the gap, Ben. It's not obvious, the connection between the mapping and the legislation. And I was working at some point with Simon Buckingham-Shum, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was one of the most serious proponents of argumentation visualization and all this formal argumentation stuff. And he's actually very negative about anything that gets people to input argumentation visualization directly, like formal argumentation structure directly. He says, most users don't think that way. It's a skill. It's a skill that can be learned. It's a skill that can be taught. It's not that difficult, but it's still a skill. And just letting people get into that without preparation has been shown to not work repeatedly. Whereas with some preparation, it has been shown to work very well, and a skilled visualizator, a skilled idea mapper can do wonders. I believe in it. I think we all believe in it here, but the notion that but it's one point in a spectrum. And he was saying, collective intelligence is a whole spectrum, from collective sensing, knowing what's on the ground, sense making, understanding what's going on, ideation, like coming up with ideas, deciding, and the voting is that aspect of that point in the spectrum, and acting, collective action. So collective sensing, collective sense making, collective ideation, collective decision, collective action, and then looping back to sensing, of course. But I see a lot of projects that emphasize the decision aspect, but fail to see the sense making and ideation that helps people to map the space of possible actions. And this is why we believe so much in mapping, because the one defect of democracy as it is a very restricted field of decisions and framing in a very limited way what's possible. And this is why we think it's important to enable people to think more broadly about possibilities, and hence the mapping emphasis. that we believe in. So the frame is extremely important, but you're right, Ben, that connecting those decisions to political specific actions and having where I agree with you that I don't believe too much in heavyweight blockchain things, but when you speak about pledges, when you speak about having proof that somebody has given their support to something, this is where some of the action is. But when you're speaking about grassroots proof, you're right, it's not. We cannot require that as a prerequisite to counting opinions. So there's this tension. But I think that we need to have a very broad understanding of where mapping is. It's in the sense making and ideation, where the voting is on this whole broader spectrum of actions. But
So-
maps are important. Sorry, one last thing before I leave the floor. Mapping is important because at some point people go in all directions, and it's normal, and it has to happen that way. But at some point we have to say, okay, these are the main options. Can you understand? Can you have a kind of quickly a broad picture of what the options are? And crafting an easy to understand map is a high art, so that people can take a decision based on a good understanding of the map of possibilities.
Sure. And to me, that's the expertise of facilitation. And there's a whole industry built around facilitation. So that's definitely, to me, more toward Ewan's peace conversations, where you get into facilitation of actual conversations. So conceptually, the thing that comes to mind is, again, from a grassroots perspective, is we've been having these conversations for 20 years, and the world goes on, and poor people die. So things are happening right now, and my idea is to latch on to the physical reality of what's happening and to try to triage as much of it as possible into debate map, is what I think of this universe of information, to be able to start to just go down right now to, well, now, they're not protesting in person right now, but for instance, in Vermont, just yesterday, they made a financial decision to close 3 of the state colleges in our state. And our state is only 600,000 people total. The devastation economically, what happened is they started a change.org petition, and 22,000 people in one day in Vermont signed a change.org petition. That is an absolute windfall of participation. And it all went to change.org. And those voters, those 22,000 people who signed up for change.org and participated in that petition, they also care about many other issues in Vermont. And if I had, for instance, deployed already my statewide, district-based survey, participatory survey system, which will be Mark, as you mentioned, the ideation, the phases, what came to mind is the OODA loop, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, which was the most renowned war jet fighter pilot, I think, in World War II. Had way more kills than anyone, and they debriefed him on what his thinking was, why he was so good, and they distilled it down to this OODA loop, OODA. You can Google that sometime, but that's what you just pointed out. But that is the point, is this iterative feedback loop. So again, the thing I'll point out is, during all of this higher level sophisticated thinking, real life is going on, and these laws are being passed no matter what. Right now, with super imperfect processes, for instance, just Keala, like Timothy was saying, if Keala were implemented, the level of improvements, you can't even calculate. It's orders of magnitude, because right now they're just not keeping track of anything at all. It's a complete no man's land that lobbyists know how to dominate that space. So 20,000 people in Vermont yesterday needed a tool to voice their opinion to their legislators about why they should not, the specific proposal was, delay the vote next week. They were going to vote on it to finalize the closure, and in one day, we have now our social media channels that are specific to Vermont politics have legislators all posting about their email inbox One legislator said he replied to 563 emails yesterday and about 350 the day before. And they're all saying that is exponentially more contacts than they've ever heard from voters in their 20 years of being in the legislature. So we're living in this moment, and I'm sitting here going, oh my God, there's these super smart people who are all debating about the finer details of these technologies, and the house is on fire. And we need to like roll something out there. And so that's why I ended up basically at survey software, because there are out of the box solutions that scale. And what I have been trying to map out myself is how you connect survey questions. This is a familiar user interface that voters have experienced already. They take surveys right now. How do you map the answers to surveys into some sort of canonical debate map structure that then can gain, because my idea, to bring it back to what we're all talking about here, is voters take a survey, maybe it's at a high level of what your general sentiments are, and then the next round of surveys dig deeper in to the answers of the previous survey. And through that iterative clarification process, the results that you could achieve, in my mind, are what everyone in this group is trying to build out the specifics of. How do you collectively rank the truthiness or falsiness of a certain assertion? That's super finer point details. But if you just got people to say, hey, I support, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, one question, like, are the surveys like open, like people can propose stuff, like free text?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that is one of the key elements I was speaking to just last week about Question Pro. So if you Google Question Pro, you can see it's a software as a service platform. They have an API. They have a great dashboard. They provide general reports. What I described to them is, and this is based off of the learnings from Taiwan and Audrey Tang and the GovZero movement in Taiwan, which actually stems from the Sunflower Movement, which was a student protest that stormed their parliament and took over the parliament, refused to move. That student protest resulted in the technology known as Taiwan, which is actually not just a technology, it's a combination of in-person group facilitations with large-scale opinion polling. But yes, Felix, that's one of the main points of that Taiwan movement, was the power in a survey is held within who gets to ask the question. And so here in Vermont, what I'm going to roll out is a legislator-produced participatory podcast, which will basically be them reading their newsletter that they already put out, 20 minutes of update. I'm a legislator, here's what I'm working on, here's what I want to know my voters' opinions on. And then voters click on a link, take a survey. When I say click on a link, please know that these surveys can all be completed through a touch tone telephone interface, an IVR, interactive voice response system. Press 1 to do this, press 2 to do this. And then you can also actually just leave a free-form voice message and apply machine learning and NLP to pull out sentiment, to create word mapping, to do really sophisticated stuff. And the funny thing is, this is all table stakes, so to speak, in the call center industry. So corporations have been recording audio and parsing the audio conversations for decades because they want to know that their call center service agents are, providing good service. So again, I'm looking around to the world around me and trying to look at what are the most refined out-of-the-box products, and most of them have APIs, and then just put them behind a common interface. So Felix, to your point, again, to finish my thought, in Vermont, what I'm rolling out is a legislator-administered feedback loop. The one-to-many is podcast. The many-to-one is a survey. And then I'm creating basically a parallel feedback loop that voters themselves get to initiate. So the voters will be able to create the questions for the survey that they themselves will also take. And if you look into Polis, actually look up, if you Google Polis, they just had a great BBC article printed about them in November 2019. And I talked to Colin in about September 2019, and he told me that there was going to be some new data coming out. Now, interestingly, I'm not using Polis because Colin and I, after much deliberation, he basically decided he didn't want Polis integrated into a larger ecosystem of software. So he wanted his software, although it's open source. I've described to him everything I just described to you, but you know, he said basically you can use it, but we're just not going to really like help you. And my thing is, I don't want to work with people that there's not a values alignment. So I moved on to other survey software company, but I'm going to reproduce the context that Polis uses, which is you can just create a statement. Voters get to just create a statement, and the only options are agree, disagree, or skip. And the algorithm behind it, to my understanding, and again, this is open source software, so Colin sent me the link to their GitHub repository, and it's in Python, but I, may as well be in Chinese for me. So that doesn't mean much to me, but it is transparent, so that's good. But I'm going to use this more dynamic survey software and just only use the agree, disagree, and skip dynamic for the voter produced feedback cycle. And Colin, there's a lot of years and years of learning and data science that went into why Polis did what they did. And so this is the thing that I love about my approach is I'm kind of like not smart enough to do it all myself. So that makes me be humble to all the best experts out there. And all these, Question Pro, Polis, V-Taiwan, they all have these deep, rich histories. And they've come to their product through a lot of deep thinking. But necessity is the mother of invention, and I can't write code, so I just do what I can do. But yes, Felix, you hit the nail on the head. Because when you talk about the power dynamic, just look at the history of V-Taiwan and read that new article on Polis, and it's just deeply inspiring to me because this is so possible right now. Another thing I'll say about my particular situation is that I'm in Vermont, which I honestly feel is a highly leveraged context for any sort of political innovation. So my senator is Bernie Sanders. Vermont was our own country for 14 years before we became the first new state to the original 13 colonies in the United States. We have a rich history of political innovation and independence here in our state, and we've shown that we can produce internationally popular politicians, despite the fact that he just threw in the towel to Biden. But nonetheless, I feel like Vermont is a very interesting petri dish to explore the possibilities of this type of political innovation that we're all discussing. So my kind of end goal is at one point to take one of your products or somebody's amazing talent and try to use Vermont as a testing grounds, but not in the theoretical space. In the real active proposal, there's real people's lives that depend on this stuff space.
A couple of comments there, because what you're talking about is something that I typically call opinion polling tools. I think what canonical debate can best be described as it's like more of an information seeking structuring platform. And then there's the third space, which is like a deliberation platform. And at least my personal interest for like the more rudimentary platform level, like how do you structure information, is because the other two are pretty much built on top of it. A lot of what you want to do, you can do, like you described, you can do that. But you'll run into some problems at some point when you actually want to start structuring that information, and if you want to prevent people from posting the same surveys over and over again. And how do you know which surveys to show and which not? And so when you say it's more theoretical, the stuff we do, that's not really the right way of saying it. It's more fundamental. We're looking more at the platform level. Like, supposing the information has come in, be it through opinion polling, through some whatever process, how do you structure it? So, and you definitely totally need both. And I think a lot of what has happened in the debate mapping space exactly has gone a bit awry because it's never been connected to the end goal. So it's definitely interesting to hear, but you need both.
So the quick response is polling software has coding. It's like cost coding. All the answers are formally coded in real time, and that's how they can parse through the results. By demographic, you can add all these various factors and create all sorts of comparisons. So when I looked at Question Pro's survey software, and I'm learning all this stuff in real time, so I am no expert on anything. I'm just saying what I know to be true right now. Question Pro software, when you look at it, you get to enter actual codes and create types of answers. So this is why I think it's such an interesting combination with what Canonical Debate Lab is doing. The thing that the polling software isn't doing is just creating the large map structure, but it's creating structured data that can be parsed through, but it's not creating connections between sets of structured data.
And
so
that's
you don't
the tricky
get that.
bit. That's the tricky bit, and that's why we've been having lengthy discussions over how to even do it in the first place. So
Yeah.
do you do it like more based on theory? Do you do it more like what's understandable? What do you allow? What don't you allow?
Well, so I love the idea when I hear you guys debate back and forth these things. I love the idea of being able to, and again, I'm coming from kind of the user perspective, a non-expert, non-coding user perspective. If I had a debate map to look at and search through, I would love to be able to have different views. Like, what's my debate map of this topic? What's the Republicans' debate map of this topic? What's the governor's debate map? And be able to click through all those different views and that's what you can do with opinion polling. So if you go to Pew and you start playing around with their graphs, that's basically exactly what you can do.
I think IdeaLoom has a similar feature right now where you can see different views of something like that.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say is, for me, it's really important. There's an important values match that I require in my own work. So, for instance, I'm a for-profit company, but I am a mission-driven enterprise, and my bylaws stipulate that financial gains will be left on the table to maintain our core values. And so that's, and I can go deep into the law of how that's legally binding, and the investors come on board deeply understanding the financial restraints of profit, but it does allow financial viability. So yeah, I think you make very good points, Stephen, and and certainly I do not want to give the impression that I am being demeaning or derogatory in any way, because you guys are doing amazing work. And this is kind of how this is what democracy is all about. It takes everybody. I truly believe everyone's got a role, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for you guys inspiring me to know that, wow, there's something out there, a larger vision possible. It's kind of what you guys represent to me, quite frankly. That higher level vision to strive for, because there's all this horribly inadequate technology being deployed right now, and it's all for financial gains and biased, just monetary driven outcomes, and it's not.
Yeah, I would want to point out a couple things though that you said there. One is against what is in the white paper as the canonical debate. What is it? What is the term you use? The principles. It's against one of the principles, which is I don't want to show anyone what the governor's debate map looks like. I don't want to show anyone what any specific person's debate map looks like. That would essentially promote one of the things we're trying to end, which is the cult of personality and the bias based on who said what, right? There's a role in society for that, which is trust. But trust is a replacement for knowledge. Trust is something you need to do when you don't have the knowledge. So the main goal of the canonical debate would be to replace the need for trust with the actual knowledge. And there's a lot of reasons why we don't have that knowledge and have to rely on trust. And I think a lot of them can be resolved given the right design for the canonical debate. And so, one of the main ways I look at the canonical debate is creating an information architecture, not to necessarily capture everything, but it's to create a structure, an information architecture upon which we can hang our information and accumulate in ways that are reusable by people. So, you know, this might, in the end, this might be one of the reasons under some fundamental differences with some of the other people here in the group as well is, you know, kind of what is the purpose of capturing these maps? And I think part of it is not trying to be perfect, but to be practical in a way that actually works, right? So that's one of the deep debates we'll need to have, is what those points are. But the other thing I wanted to say was that all the tools out there that you state are interesting in that they can, you know, they can be practical if applied right and used. But one of my fundamental drivers for the canonical debate as well is, in fact, I've taken a step back from being a hands-on activist. The reason being the fundamental flaw I see in our information structure. So, you know, while it's great that you can get 90% of people to decide that we need single payer healthcare and communicate that to the decision makers, right? That's a tool for now, but it's a sort of, it's kind of like petition drives in the sense that you're sampling popular opinion, which can be highly manipulated without having the solid information foundations. I'm essentially waiting to take strong positions based on me being totally convinced about them, right? And I can't do that until I fully see the other side and I fully see the complexities of the impact, right? You know, maybe single payer healthcare, depending on how it all plays out and when we've collected all the information, is something we want 20 years from now. But if we try to do it now, we'll destroy our structure in society, maybe. So in other words, it might be not so much a binary switch as a what is the best way to get there question. And when I look at politics, I see so much of it being blanket statements without any acknowledgement of the subtleties involved, because people don't have time, and politics becomes a question of what is possible, and what is possible is making inexact statements that get more popular support, and so that's I think one of the difference, or one of the reasons for an underlying focus and patience in terms of trying to get the foundation right, and let other people kind of do the politics until we can catch up with that.
So again, what I think about is who's going to look out for the poor people during that time.
But
So
nothing
we're
holds you
talking-
back.
But we can't, you know, so that
You can be active in politics already right now without the canonical debate technology being there. There's so much room for improvement without doing the type of stuff that we are doing. I don't think that one necessarily needs the other at this point in time. You very correctly pointed out there's already right now so much out there you can do. So if that's what you want to do, then definitely you should focus on that.
right, it would be kind of like asking, okay, but who's going to look at the climate change problem if you're looking out for the poor people?
They're tied
If-
together.
They're tied together, and so is the canonical debate tied to your problem. But it doesn't give you the solution right now because it's not ready and out the door. But so I need to choose, do I want to touch a little bit on each problem in the world, or do I want to focus and go dive deep on a single one? So many people who like are single issue politicians or activists and are effective because they choose a single issue and only focus on that, right? And for me, with the canonical debate, that's kind of been my choice is, you know, I want to be sure about everything before I'm ready to choose and you know, put my money down on specific issues.
I have a question for you. I have two questions for you, actually. One is, you say you don't want to show any one person's specific viewpoint. And my starting point has been exactly the opposite. I want to show everybody specific viewpoints because I think that though I do believe there is such a thing as a useful work of creating a reference point that has to be simpler and that has to not include everything, I don't see how to create that except by looking at everybody's viewpoint and weaving them together to create.
Right, but you can, you can look at aggregate data, right, for health records, for example, without looking at an individual person's record and revealing that publicly, right?
I think, I think that the data, when you're speaking about sense, it's not just data points. You need there will be agreement or disagreement about whether these two positions are actually the same or not. So you'll need to dig deeper than just apply data. But anyway, that's one thing.
Well, so that falls in the category of things that are debatable. So you can have a debate about that as well.
Exactly.
Right? But as a matter who said it is a different,
But what I'm saying is you need to understand also communities, and I think you need to have a view of communities. You speak about trust. I mean, people base trust on tribal, and that's part of the problem. We agree. On the other hand, how should I put it? We don't want to rely on numbers, right? I mean, in Galileo's time, the majority was convinced the Earth was flat. I'm caricaturing. I know that's not historically accurate, but I'm trying to make you want to know that Thalès de Milet had good arguments for not believing so even before Galileo, and that's why you need argument mapping, and why you need to know who backs a certain position. And it's not just numbers, it's expertise and reasons why and so on.
Why do you need to know who backs? Let's dive into that, though. That's the question. Why do you need to know who backs it?
Because knowledge matters. And I'll get back. The other thing...
Wait. But, okay, knowledge matters, but why can't you have the...
Before we dig into that, and I agree it's worth digging into, there's another thing that I think I heard you say... you have to know, you don't just want, you have to have knowledge before you take a decision, and you don't need always a canonical map to take decisions. I think that a lot of efforts to articulate concept mapping in politics don't think about information cost. Like there's a cost to being informed. And the whole point of liquid democracy, it has tons of limits and it allows people to disregard arguments, but it also allows people to make decisions about the economy of saying, I don't have time to dig into this, but I still may have opinions.
Right, but so there's, again, a lot of good points there, but I think all are addressed with the canonical debate, which is that, first of all,
and real quick, can I just comment on the why you would need to know a person's identity? So just because there are candidates running for office. They're running for office on a specific set of ideas.
That's a different thing though. That's a statement of fact and something to be debated over. Like if you're going to say why we should elect Bernie Sanders, right? Obviously, it's important to know Bernie Sanders, and it's important to know what he says and thinks. But we should elect Bernie Sanders because he's going to push for universal health care. Do you care if that argument was made by me or by you or by whoever? Like, no, you just need to know if it's true.
Perfect.
You don't care who said that.
I 100% agree. And this is actually gets to exactly the kind of space that I dabble in. What does the transition period look like? It's not going to be a snap of the fingers and all of a sudden everybody knows how to use the debate map and has access to a fully fleshed out debate map. There's going to be a slow grind to get there. And what I'm trying to do is start the meat grinder now at the trenches level, because it's going to be 10 years before that trajectory matches up with where you guys are headed with the actual technology and ideas. So that's
the canonical debate. is not meant to even do all that for everybody. The idea of the canonical debate is to have a very specific function, and people like you that are trying to connect it to people, it's to create an ecosystem of possibilities of ways to translate that data to people and ways to translate what people say into the canonical debate. So the whole vision is to have people and layers and sites and things like that doing that translation, right? And that's exactly what we're kind of putting into practice right now with the Great American Debate, right? Which started out as collecting information from the climate change debate. Right now is kind of pivoting to the COVID-19 pandemic. But they are essentially trying to fulfill that role, which is translate the canonical debate map of arguments and facts into American politics, which is what are the positions that people take, what are the arguments, why do they take that, and that sort of thing, right? So yes, absolutely, that should happen, and it needs to happen now, and it's good you get started on that. We have to catch up so that we can merge later, but it's,
So one of the ideas that I want to do is really figure out the best way I can start capturing the data that I'm going to go out and capture. I've already got 7 episodes recorded of my podcast. I'm in the process of formulating the surveys that are going to go with that. I just interviewed our lieutenant governor, who's running for governor now, our secretary of state, who was previously the president of the National Association of Secretaries of State. How do I start capturing the data, which I intend to do in the next 60 days, hopefully. I'm actually currently putting together a pitch deck to look for a little bit of funding to help roll this out, using the specific example that there was just a change.org petition. How can we capture that data
you should
in a
talk
way
to
that we can tap back into it down the road when things are ready?
You should talk to Jamie Sage, right, from Great American Debate, because she would love to help figure out a way where you can do that and use what is currently the canonical debate site, or debate map, because we are capturing data in there. I don't know if it's going to be efficient for you, or if she can show you her techniques, because they transcribe stuff into spreadsheets, and the spreadsheets are later pulled by hand into the thing. But yeah, talk to her about that, because she's kind of working on that end of things. Back to Marc-Antoine, what was the other one we were talking about? So we talked about people needing to know. You talked about communities and having a sense of that, which is a fantastic point. And there's a couple different aspects to that. But I'm not sure which ones we can go into now. One of them is like, if a debate is being held from the perspective of U.S. politics, what are people in Europe or China or South America supposed to think about that debate, right? So that there's questions about compartmentalizing in terms of context and participants, but I don't want to do that. So we have to think about how to handle that. But
so Timothy, real quick, the other concept is open source. So, and this is something I kind of ran into with Colin, and it's somewhat of an ethical dilemma for me, because there's great intention behind people putting out open source software. And what I'm trying to do is have a values match on the front end before I use someone's open source software. But by the nature of open source, it can just be used by anyone. So how do you're talking about the ways that you see canonical debate map being used, but if it's going to be open source, how do you actually prevent? Because one of my principal concepts that I operate by is, as I was mentioning, my wife's a healthcare provider, the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. And that's something I'm very deeply concerned about with any sort of political technology, is the information asymmetry and how it could just be snatched up and used for the exact wrong reasons. Which is why I'm, as a developer, not open sourcing my software. It's not because I'm opposed to being audited or anything like that. It's more about, if it's just out there on a repo, how do you prevent someone from using it against the core values?
You don't.
Yeah, the way you win, and the way the canonical debate can happen, and this is also a lot of the principles go into thinking through how do you keep the canonical debate canonical, because the moment people start disagreeing with your outcomes, they create their own, right? You get, it's like news outlets. The moment people start disagreeing with CNN, right, or Fox or whatever, they create their own Breitbart or their own, I forget the Daily Beast or whatever. They, you start creating your own outlets, so you can say what you think is right. So how do you keep the canonical debate canonical? And also, back to your thing about people taking technology, a lot of these analogies go back to Wikipedia, which is, Wikipedia has done it. It's open source. It's
Have you ever seen the TED Talk on Wikipedia and how there's corporate entities that hire people specifically to sit there all day long and edit the Wikipedia posts, and how there's examples of like an author who can't even edit his own Wikipedia post on his own book?
Yeah, but that's a different subject, right? Because that is a question of vector attacks, or attack vectors. The thing is that Wikipedia, people can erase and put their own, right? And Wikipedia was not made for handling controversy. Whereas
Wikipedia also is not accepted as a citation for academia.
Right, but it links to, Wikipedia is, for all its problems, has provided you the answer for who is this or what is that, right? If you want to go look up something, and it's a noun, essentially, an event or whatever, and you've never heard of it before, to go to Wikipedia. And you're going to go there and you're going to get pretty good information. I mean, Wikipedia, in terms of quality of information, is I've heard studies, I haven't read them, so I don't know it's true, but I've heard the claim it's better than old encyclopedias, right, that are done essentially closed source. They're closed source encyclopedias.
You can't edit an encyclopedia that's been printed and distributed.
Right, but it's also produced by a company. It's closed source. So the question, though, is, what do you do about corporations that hire people to go and control their image? And the answer to that is, we want that. For the canonical debate, you want that. You want people as biased as possible to come in and try to win the debate as hard as possible. And that's exactly the logic behind the judicial system in the United States, which is an adversarial system, where you don't want just independent judges sitting there and analyzing the case and done. You want people representing each side who will do everything they can, hopefully within the rules, to win that argument.
And
right?
You feel
because
like that works without knowing anyone's identity, the kind of use case you're talking about.
Yes, because it's not evaluated on who said it. It's evaluated on what is said and whether or not it's true and whether or not it's relevant.
So right? that's one of the gaps that I can't see any plausible bridge to, is we have a real world that really operates right now, and it's 100% about the person because of just the formalities, and I'm not arguing that that's the best way to do it, but I'm just saying that's where we are right now. And to somehow get into this world where it's just pure meritocracy, for me, that's a really hard kind of conceptual gap to get through.
Okay, but the point that people don't often see about the canonical debate is it doesn't make any decisions for you. It doesn't give you the answer. It only gives you the access to the knowledge, well organized, right? Now, there are scoring methods that have to exist to help, right? But the scoring methods, so what are the scoring methods for? They're ways to weight or display what is more relevant, what is not relevant. It's ways to take a temperature in terms of what is being accepted as true or not, right? It doesn't force you to accept something as being true. It can tell you what the general population is saying is true. And it can help you understand, for example, what's the best way to put this? I mean, for one thing, multiple scoring methods. So each scoring method is going to have biases, right? So by having multiple scoring methods, the point is to get people familiar with the fact that not any one of them has the answer. They're just ways of looking at it. You can and this was probably the default view, look at it from your perspective of what you think is right or not, what you agree with and what you disagree with. So there needs to be methods for avoiding, yeah, I'll get to that. So yeah, there needs to be ways of avoiding bias, because there's just a bandwagon effect where if something is popular, people agree with it. It's like, you know, whichever candidate in the election is winning, people start supporting that candidate because they like to support a winner. If people say that, so you need to be careful about that and do studies. You know, Stephen, this could definitely be one of your areas, is to study, you know, how people are reacting to, for example, being shown essentially the popular opinion first, versus having to go into something and look at the arguments and put your vote first before you see what that is, right?
Yeah, you take
and there's other tools.
You do a baseline.
Yeah, and then there's other tools that are meant to show, you know, what people are thinking. So while I said we don't want to reveal what any one person is thinking, I think a very interesting feature would be, okay, show me the votes of somebody who disagrees with me, you know, on this. Like if COVID-19 is a bio weapons attack, you know, I don't believe it, but show me somebody who really believes it, and show me what they voted they believe. And you can follow that around and see the thinking of a random person.
So
right?
You know what just dawned on me about what you're describing, and this is not intellectual, it's philosophical. Removing identity removes the human element from this. So basically what you're describing to me is kind of a disconnected set of data. Because
there are articles.
When humans talk to each other, they want to have a human interaction, and this is why right now we have this. You know, we have a game show host as a president, because people put the celebrity up on. People want that element of human connection, of the messiness of knowing who said what.
So the canonical debate is not about persuasion, right? And what you're talking about is persuasion. So the idea, like the way I picture this playing out, hopefully, is the canonical debate puts it all together in a more or less cold format that's easy to use. It's not totally without human involvement, because any debate, if you get all the facts, comes down to what are your priorities, what are your values, and there's going to be value-based arguments, right? It's going to be, we should preserve all languages because culture is important, versus, but I want a highway or something, right? You know, but there's going to be the human factor in terms of what is important, what points are you arguing, and then how do you weigh one and get off with the other, right?
So like as a human consuming this data set that has no identities connected, how would I know that it's not just a bunch of data from a robot? How do I know IBM Watson didn't just print all those awesome answers out that you told me are now correct? And now, and again, this is not you,
because
as a person. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
No, yeah, sure. The point is that an argument can fit into a tweet, but a tweet has no foundation. It has no strength to back it up. It's just said, right? Whereas the canonical debate, when a bunch of facts are spit out by Watson, they have to build on to each other and come from somewhere, right? And so somebody, and this is the thing, the average voter is not going to do it. The average voter is not going to do it. But you know what? There's somebody out there who has studied their entire life coronaviruses and genetic strains for the last 20 years. And if suddenly Watson spits out a bunch of numbers, and they're going to be like, what? Where did you get this? No. So there are people whose life revolves around a very small, that's what PhDs are, right? When you get a PhD, you're not meant to answer a whole policy issue. You're studying one little tiny thing that hopefully expands human knowledge. And if machines start trying to take over and tell people something totally contrary to what you studied your entire life, you're going to start going in there and analyzing that and getting people to look at it and try to validate it in your little world, right? But this is how human knowledge is supposed to work. That's how it's supposed to work, is scientists and researchers and whatever are trying to find things that they can prove are true.
Are you familiar
and those
with George?
papers are supposed to be reused for other fact findings and so on. We're supposed to be building information up to have a firmer foundation, but it's not working because we don't have the information architecture to structure it properly.
See, I would argue similar to how, you know, it's true that there's kind of out of the box solutions that I can apply right now to gain major gains. I think that's true also with what you're saying. The information is out there right now. It's just that people don't believe the facts. So to further
because
support
it's not
the
structured
facts,
in a way.
well, I would maybe propose a different reason of why. It's because people are nuts. People aren't logical thinkers like you. Are you familiar with George Lakoff, the linguist, who talks about why the Republicans beat the Democrats all the time? It's because he speaks to values. The Democrats actually do, and this is generalizing, this is the point of his book as I understand it, the Democrats hit more facts. They are cold-blooded, fact-based scientists, and you know what they fail to do? Is connect with human beings, and therefore they lose every single election to the Republicans, who actually avoid facts, but they speak to your emotions and they speak to values, and that's what moves people into political action. So again, for me, you are light years ahead of 99% of the population. You just aren't going to be able, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, because I think this is to me, this is the core discussion that needs to be had. How do you take the amazing gains of academia right now and science and coders, and how do you start integrating it into the real world in a way that these imperfect people actually will interact with it?
I'll ask you this: how does corruption work, and how does ending corruption work? It works. Corruption happens because the society or structure, organization in which it exists, permits it to a certain degree, right? Why is there much worse corruption in, say, Brazil, where I'm living, as opposed to the United States? It's not like the United States is corruption free, and it's not like people are just more honest in the United States. It's that the constraints of society around corruption are just much looser here. And when people look at how do we end corruption, a lot of it is about trying to strengthen up that foundation and restrict more and more the points where the flexibility people have that allows in corruption. And to me, politics is exactly the same thing. Donald Trump and the Republicans have completely loosened up the standards as to how important being true about things is, right? I'm not saying there's no place for rhetoric in politics. I think people need to connect to their voters. But I think what you need to be doing is promoting policies that you can prove are good, and it comes down to just values. You speak to values. You know, do you want to end poverty, or do you want to promote entrepreneurialism, or do you want to, and so these are actual real choices people have to make, and that politicians can talk to. But it's much more interesting if it's all been boiled down to, yes, actually, this has all been verified that if you do this, these many people will get out of starvation, and if you at the same thing, it'll take longer for people to create new businesses, right? Once you've nailed down the facts, it's interesting to talk values. It's just that we've lost the connection to facts at this point. So Marc-Antoine, answering your question about attacks, right? Or about, how do you keep people from creating bots and taking over the opinion polls, right? The one linchpin to this whole thing that I see right now is getting a one account per human policy. Okay, that's a problem that hasn't been cracked yet. That is a problem that people in blockchain space are working on. There are a lot of people working on identity systems that do that, right? So my idea is to rely on them because they're experts in that subject. One workaround would be for now.
The whole decentralized ID work. There's a lot of stuff happening there.
Right. The problem with blockchain is its advantage is you can create thousands of anonymous wallets for a single person, right? But there are reasons. For example, anything that's voting related, except for those who like Democracy Earth actually has a thing where it's just how many tokens you have versus how many people you are. But I firmly believe in the one vote per person approach. And so how do you enforce that? Well, it's a problem governments have been dealing with since democracy, right?
Right, but
as a starting point, you could trust governments and their voter rolls, and you could say, okay, anybody who's a registered voter gets one account, and okay, that can be gamed and all that. And if a country starts seeing an advantage in freely giving out people multiple votes, they have to be shut off until that's controlled. But that would be a first shot until technology.
No, I'm fine with a pragmatic first shot like that. But what I'm saying is that does mean accounting for identity. When you say we won't get identity origin, well, you have to keep track of origin of
yes,
of
you track
because
users. Yes,
depends.
Yes. And also for spamming, there are people going to be trying to do denial of service attacks or take down the system or spam it or whatever, and so those things have to be countered. Right?
So I understand you want to hide it, and I've been myself very split. I mean, I see the point that Ben is making about without personal connection, people don't relate, and I see the point also about sometimes people are more responsible when their name's on the line, but on the other hand, there is the opposite situation where people will follow a cult of personality. I think that's one thing you're touching. But the other one is very much, there's no, how should I put it? People will also be more.
Yeah.
No, it's not just expertise. People, that is one issue, but it's an important one, but it can be handled in other ways. Like you can show expertise without showing your identity. That's different. But it is an important point too. But no, I'm more interested in the point of people will be more honest sometimes where their name is not on the line. And with the problem when your name is on the line is you cannot prevent vote buying. You cannot prevent threats. You cannot prevent. So there are also reasons to not have the name. Then, by the way, so it goes. I'm split on this. It is complicated. It goes both ways. Yes, Felix.
Yes, so from the area of cryptography, there are some solutions. Like if you have voting ID, there's like 30 years old cryptographic voting protocols and stuff. And there are stuff like involving zero knowledge proofs that if everyone has an identity, you can verify that they voted only once, but you cannot know who it was. So this all exists, just that you know. Just wanted to add that.
No, that's absolutely true. But we should also, I don't know, I've been following someone who spends a lot of time checking these systems and finding flaws in them. It's a solved problem and it isn't.
I think you're referring to zero knowledge proofs, Felix.
Yeah, it's
he called
the
them
whole
explicitly.
thing. The whole thing involves zero knowledge proofs. If you're interested, I can dig out the name of the protocols, but maybe not relevant.
Because you seem to imply that you either need to choose to share your identity or not, but I never saw it that way. I agree with Tim, the base platform doesn't share it. If you want to share your own opinion, by all means do so, and the base platform should allow your opinion to be linked back to that. But I don't think you should be forced to share what you believe in. But if you on the platform can express what you believe in and it's personally tied to you, then as an individual you can still choose to share.
That would be my only request. I think that's perfect solution. It's by default. So first you go through the zero proof identity, you verify one person, and then from there it's default private, identity hidden. And anytime you wanted to, you flip the switch, and that could be designated by issue. So for instance, the issue of cannabis is very contentious, and there are medical providers who are physicians who support cannabis fully, but they have just said, I could never state my opinion because there's no way to say it to a legislator and verify that, yes, I'm actually a physician, so I have the expertise, but not show you my ID or my name to avoid any potential retribution. So for years and years, this is the same thing with healthcare. This is the same thing with many, many issues. Maybe there's 2 or 3 issues that I'm willing to put my name on, and then there's a dozen that I have outlier positions for my industry or my family or whoever that I don't want to put my name on. The thing that the voluntary identity option also solves is my idea to tap in to the current activities right now of this celebrity-based basically attention. If you're a celebrity, you get attention. Tim, when you pointed out correctly that there are people who dedicate their entire lives to certain things, and absolutely their opinion should be known within the context of their experience on that topic, the way to do that is to allow them to show their identity. So if I'm a thought leader in some area, I would love the option, particularly if, and this is where you connect to the real world right now, particularly if I already run a blog or a YouTube channel and I have an audience that I can really plug in to this idea of meaningful, measurable participation through this canonical debate lab. So the identities are the way to actually get everyone into this context of participating within this amazing context of tracking the opinions and going a layer deeper where we actually get to vote on how much we think someone else's opinion is real or not. I mean, you guys are definitely hitting the nail on the head. Question is, how do we get there?
Just to relate to that, because that's actually exactly what I'm doing right now. So I have like a base platform right now to set up debate maps, but that doesn't allow you to easily share your opinion. So the first thing I'm doing right now is allowing you to write a blog post just to share your opinion, but you just annotate it and you link back to the debate map, pretty much inviting people to contradict you or to say, yes, I believe in that as well.
Exactly. That was my other point with Timothy, to reiterate what you said, but in a different way. You have the PhDs, let them put their identity on it, put an idea out there, because what that does is that invites the diversity of contradictions, which is what you were talking about, is kind of the whole point. We want to provoke people into trying to prove us wrong, hence the judicial system, which I completely agree with that.
One of the, in fact, like one of the main concepts of this is that it would be so useful in Twitter and Facebook debates to just be able to boom, no, here's the consensus, or here's all the information that you just said this, but here's all the information there.
And take that a step into the committee room, because what's the difference between applying that to Twitter right now versus me, who I already go into the committee hearings in our legislature, not anymore.
No, yeah, live debating and everything.
So what we could do right now is on Zoom, we could capture our legislature's entire debates. Our legislature is active right now, and it's passing laws under emergency measures that voters have no access to these conversations. There's no way for voters right now to collectively say, 200 of us agree or disagree with this, and here's that data, you do with it what you will. So people, what they're defaulting to right now is Facebook, YouTube, these predatory surveillance capitalism-based business models. The government is forcing voters in there. So now I have to tell my opinion on Facebook to my senator. I'm definitely not going to be talking about my political opinions on Facebook. So now I'm cut out from the legislative process right now because there's no way to do it meeting these appropriate measures that we're all discussing right now.
Yeah. I wish we were there already. I understand your impatience because I'm impatient too.
And please, again, to clarify, I do not want anything I'm saying to be interpreted as something as in anyone is doing anything wrong or in any way insufficient. I mean, I'm telling you, if you guys could look into my brain, you guys are the fucking superheroes here on the academic side who are going to, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it's like people need to design the systems that are going to save us from further calamity. So, and that's why I feel grateful to even be having access to conversations like this, you know?
One thing I think we should do is, a lot of us have tools. Felix has, I do, Steven told me he's working on one. Like, if I go to the Great American Debate, you keep mentioning it, all I see is a fluff site that says this is what we're doing, but I don't see it in action. I want demos.
Oh, yeah, hold on. Okay, there's I think there's a private site you need access to, but if you go to canonicaldebate.com, that's one of our tools in action. That's debate map that's made by Venrix in the group. If you go to debate
There's
map,
a debate map app. Yes, I've seen this
yeah.
one, but that's not the same as a Great American Debate, right?
Well, okay, so where is it? Now, I closed it.
and you know, I'd like to show my stuff. What Steven said about connecting blogs to debate map, I want to see that.
Yeah, that's what I applied a grant for right now. So if all goes well, I can work on that the next 2 years, but I doubt I'll get it.
Well, can we connect? Because I have a tool that does part of this. It's far from complete, but can we join forces?
So
yeah, well, we can definitely pick up the meeting, because Felix planned like 10 meetings or so, and apparently we're doing all of them. So we can definitely pick that up as a topic for the next meeting.
And one thing also is, Jack is annoyed because the start date was not decided in advance, so he could not get in. So we need to be a bit more disciplined about this. But we also need, when we pick a date, to have a duration, because I had no idea what I was getting into. I have a long day ahead of me. I would like to move for closure. So yeah,
completely agree. Completely agree. So I think I will write in the Slack channel that the next dates, so many people said they have time, that will happen. And then we limit it to, what do you think, 1 hour? So everyone is not overwhelmed.
I think 1 hour. It could be a bit more, like 1 hour and a half, but I think 2 hours.
Like the rough guideline should be 1 hour, I guess.
Yeah, and we should also choose kind of an agenda of topics, so we can kind of.
I think because there were few of us, and it was a bit of we didn't get the full roster we were hoping for. We went with what the people who were there had to say, and we went from presentations to. I understand the informality. I don't expect everything to always go according to plan.
It helps.
But
helps
I
to
agree.
align.
Let's have some planning.
Yeah, it helps to align, so we know much better now what Ben, Timothy, and Marc-Antoine, Steven, and me are doing. And I recorded the video, and it's there for others, so they can watch it before the next talk.
Yeah. Excellent. And I'll have a look at some of what you're doing. Yes, I've looked at Socrates Tree. That's very interesting. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
All right. So then
I just uploaded a picture to the Hangouts channel with kind of a screenshot of one of the maps that we're doing in the Great American Debate.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And a link. There's a link in the chat here that I don't know if it works for you or not, but give it a shot.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Ben, always good to see you. It's been a while, so it's good to see you again.
Yeah. And give me a ring.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
I will.
Great to meet you, Felix and Mark.
Yeah, great to meet you too.
Meeting you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.